Hello, and welcome back to Authentically Shawna. I'm your host, Dr. Shawna Burke. Today, I am joined by Dr. Brian Plant, who is a doctor of naturopathic medicine. Although we're not really talking about naturopathic medicine today, we're talking about something else that he does as a part of his practice, which is to help bring people into their most authentic selves. He does that by facilitating would you call it a group? Is it a group facilitation
Yeah,
called
it's often a group.
Relatefulness? Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah, sometimes it's one-on-one, but often it's in a group.
I love that. And he is passionate about helping people become whole human beings. And I am so excited to talk to him more about authenticity and how we can bring authenticity into our everyday lives. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Super
So tell
excited.
us more about how you facilitate conversations and what that looks like for you as a practice.
Yeah, so the training that I've done is in this relational mindfulness practice called Relatefulness, which is where we're essentially bringing our attention to the present moment experience of what it's like to be relating in real time. What's it like to be me right now? What's happening in my experience? What's it like to be you right now and what's happening in your experience? And then what's happening between us in what we might call the relational field. And what's that like? What do we want to do with that as we notice more? And so, what I'm finding is that not only can this be done in a group facilitated practice, which we could talk more about, but it can also be done in every relationship, whether it's being done as a formal practice that we're timing and doing, or just a way we sprinkle more relational presence into our everyday interactions.
Can you start our conversation out by talking about what actually is authenticity? Because I think it's a word that now gets thrown around a lot. And I don't know if most of us have a great definition of what that means.
The way I understand authenticity is telling the truth and being human. So if I'm interacting with a person and I'm trying to get them to like me, or I'm wanting to convince them of something, or I'm trying to control the interaction in some way, it's less likely that I'm being truthful and giving myself permission to be fully human. And so if I can accept myself in the moment as I am, and then just reveal a little bit more of that. And a lot of times, it brings a connection to a deeper place. So I think about authenticity that way. There's an aspect of it where we're expressing ourselves, but there's also a receiving aspect as well. It's not just about me coming out of the cage and being all of me and then not staying around for impact and letting that just kind of land where it does, but I'm being relational. So how is it for the other person to be with me as I'm being my authentic self? Does my permission that I give to myself allow them or encourage them to give themselves more permission to be their authentic selves? Sometimes that's even happening unconsciously. But yeah, that's how I would think of it as, can we show up with more of ourselves and can we receive or be with others with more of ourselves as well and more of
And a
them?
place where I find most of us struggle is when we go into a group setting where we don't know a lot of people and we know there's going to be quote unquote small talk. Most people avoid situations like that because you don't know what to say to people. What do you say to someone who you don't know, who you know nothing about? And so let's talk about how to have interactions with strangers that are authentic.
This is an area that I'm continually developing and learning and am far from being an expert in. But the way that I access it in myself in a way that feels genuine and true, because I'm a very curious person, is I find out what I'm curious about. So, what is it about another person that I'm curious about? Maybe I see someone wearing an aura ring. Great. Health and wellness. That must be important to them. If they're wearing an aura ring, I have an aura ring. I'm a naturopathic doctor. So I'll sometimes use that as a conversation of like, how do you like your aura ring? As a good opener, or, if we've never talked at all, I, might say, hey, I don't think we've met yet. My name is so and so. And just kind of open the connection, be like, okay, now what? Now where's my curiosity? Where's my attention? What do I want to know more about? There's all sorts of data showing that connection is deepened when another person feels listened to and another person feels interested in. So often there's even research showing that the people that are asking questions or being interested in the other person are considered interesting in retrospect. So the person would say,
Mm.
wow, that person, I had the conversation with the most interesting person ever. And it's like, oh, well, what do you know about them? And you may not have revealed anything about yourself to that person, but because you asked them engaging questions and followed your curiosity, they felt super engaged and connected. I've heard it referred to as like reverse charisma. I may
Mm.
be botching that term a little bit, but it's so one way to do it is what am I genuinely interested about in the other person? And can I follow that? I've done this at weddings before where I'm asking people about their work and say they work in a field that I don't know anything about. I might ask them all sorts of questions that they've never been asked before about like what's the actual experience of having that kind of job? Like what do you do day to day? And like do you like it? And what don't you like about it? And if you could what's a creative problem you're trying to solve in that field that someone not in that field wouldn't know about? If they don't want to talk about work, then I might ask them other things. What's something in your life right now that you're really excited about? Or what's something you've been wanting to learn more about that you haven't had a chance to yet?
I find this happens because I'm also a very curious person, and I I don't know that it's intentional, but sometimes people overshare and they're telling you too much for how much you know that person. And what do you do in those situations? Because I sometimes don't know what to do in that situation. And so I'm sure I'm not the only person that that happens to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll just be honest, I have not figured that one out. I'm
Okay.
not sure. I mean, I think in my role as a doctor, not only do people share their heart and soul with me in the office, but a lot of times when people find out I'm a doctor, they'll be like, can we talk about, can I ask you about my gut? And I'll be like, this is the one time this week that I don't have to talk about that. And like it happened last night. I was at an event, a networking event, and someone who I was, trying to meet in a completely different context was asking me about their gut. And I was kind of like, maybe, and I was like kind of playfully evasive, like, no, we're not here to have that conversation. And so sometimes I'll do it like that. It'll be gentle. And if it's really intense, then, I may set a clear boundary like, yeah, I'm not available for that. Or if you want to work with me, you're more than welcome to work with me as a patient, but I try to keep that and my personal life separate. I may leave the conversation if I feel unsafe. There's all sorts of ways to set boundaries that are self honoring and relationship honoring that don't require us to caretake another person's experience of feeling abandoned or feeling like this is just another example of how people in my life don't listen to me or whatever. Like, we're not responsible for that story of another person, but we can still be kind.
When you figure it out, please get back to me. How do you have authentic conversations with people who you've seen multiple times but don't know a lot about? Like sometimes you're in a community space and you've said hi to this person, and you've sort of connected, but you've never gone there with that person. What's your in starting to have more connected conversation with someone who you've seen but don't know well?
Yeah, so if it's alive for me to connect with them, I may even say that, like, "Hey, I see you all the time, and I realize I've never really had a conversation with you. Like, how do you like it here?" Or like if it's at the office, or if it's somewhere else, or like, "Hey," or a church or something. It's like, "Oh, how long have you been going here?" Like, I hate small talk too. I want to be super clear about that. But sometimes there is an on ramp that is needed instead of just opening up a conversation with, in my present moment embodied experience, this is what I'm feeling, which might be something I'm very comfortable being with and sharing, but for another person might be a big jump. So I try to get a sense of how open someone is just by having, the initial conversation, but I don't tend to hold back my enthusiasm. I'm naturally a very enthusiastic, excitable, open person. So I tend to be like, I want to connect with you, or I'd love to get to know you more, or let's have a conversation. I've even met people out in the world that I like just knew that I wanted to be friends with them. And I've said, like, it's super live for me to connect with you. I want to be friends with you. In dating, that can feel a little bit more tricky. But in friendship and in professional relationships, that looking back over many years, that has worked out very well. Some of my best connections of all time have been from me just telling the truth about what I want in that connection.
And when it's reciprocated, that is
Oh yeah, it's the best.
so lovely, and then sometimes it's not, and because I feel very similar to you in that, and what do you do when it's not reciprocated?
Yeah, I mean, so in the moment, I tend to just I don't know follow the the thread. If it's like okay, well, it's good to see you," or, I've not had somebody tell me straight up in the moment that they didn't wanna connect with me.
Okay.
I think it tends to be subtler body language, and then I just kinda redirect my attention. A number of years ago, I would take rejection really personally. I still do in some contexts, but I guess in the way that we're talking about it in terms of friendship or professional connections, I tend to just see it as like, okay, we're not a good fit. And then on the back end, it's like, okay, what do I need to do to take care of myself? Is it if I'm really dysregulated, there might be like an inner child part that needs my attention. And then I might do some of those types of internal meditative exercises to soothe myself or get a sense of what is it that's really hurting here and what does it need? If I'm with a friend, I mean, that's the best. Like going to a networking event, like with a friend, it's like great. Co-regulation built in. We get to debrief our experience. And then there's a fair amount of just self-talk of like, okay, yeah, that hurt. Okay, we're noticing fear around. Maybe there's not abundance of opportunity. Okay, maybe we don't know if this is ever going to happen. That's probably not true, but I know that you're feeling that way right now, and let's just remember that the connections that are really meant for you, that feel good for both of you to be in, are somewhere else, not here.
Now, are you doing that in the moment or are you doing that after?
I'm trying to do it in the moment, but it that comes after many years of practicing doing it after, and so I am not rejection proof yet.
I mean, I I I kind of hope no one is, right? Because
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah,
yeah,
that means that you probably aren't feeling much. So I think there
yeah.
is this, how I be present with what is, and how do I move through it gracefully and move on?
That's exactly it. I mean, that's the essence of resilience right there. Can we ride the wave of whatever heartbreak, activation, fear, uncertainty, grief, and stay present with ourselves and stay present in connection? If, let's say, we are in a connection that it is in everybody's best interest to stay in. And I don't mean we're violating our own boundaries or anything, but if we're like, no, I want to be here, but I'm having this reaction, how do we stay with it? How do we make room for it so it can find its natural completion?
That brings another great point, which is, what role does silence play in authentic conversation and connection?
I love silence. Silence can be the most skillful way to respond to what arises in so many different contexts and in so many different ways. Sometimes silence is a pause, a chance to just slow down, be present, make room for a little bit more thinking before we decide what we're going to do or say next. Sometimes silence can be space for the other person to stay with whatever process they're in. Maybe someone's sharing and they're sharing an intense emotion and the story around that, and then they pause for a second. So many of us are quick to want to jump in, either soothe them or offer some kind of solution or something like that. And if we can just sit for a moment in that in between, sometimes it's like the trap door of even deeper depth opens up. And now it's like, whoa, I've never had somebody listen to me without trying to fix before or something. This is a huge edge for me because I'm a fixer, I'm a sense maker. It's a huge edge for me to be with a friend who's sharing and then just like wait and be like, I'm present in my own body. I'm tracking my own internal experience as I'm with this person. I don't have to reveal anything right now about myself, unless that feels alive and true. And that little gap there, a lot can happen.
And for you personally, how do you know when to continue to be in silence, when to say something? What's your sense of how to move forward?
Yeah, so it's different every time. I think for a while, for most of my life, it was very difficult for me to read body language, and I tended to have a lot of loud internal sensation. In therapy, we call it interoception, or the ability to, not the ability, but like the nervous system's sense of your own internal sensation. So historically, when that was very loud and very anxious, it would be a lot harder for me to kind of visually track other people and even feel in my body what's happening in the relational field. But that has developed a lot more over the years, and I have a lot less anxiety than I used to. So sometimes it's as simple as like I'm feeling it, not as some big intuitive download, but just a sense of like there's some constriction here, or like actually, it feels really open and easeful being in this gap of silence. I'm gonna just hang out here just a little bit more, even if my ego is screaming at me, like, "That's don't do that." And if I'm really not sure, I'll ask. I'll be like, "What are you needing right now?" Or I'm noticing that as I'm in this with you, silence feels appropriate. How is that for you? Or is that true for you? Or is it something different? Things like that.
That brings me to the next point, which is what are some common mistakes people make when being in authentic communication?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think I want to. The word mistake is an interesting one because that's going to mean different things to different people.
Absolutely.
For me as a recovering perfectionist, when I hear the word mistake in most contexts, I just get panic. And it's like, don't mess up. Like, I'm 100% responsible for tracking another person's experience and like being with them in the way that is tolerable for their nervous system. And I learned that when I was very young. And that's not true. It might have been true as a kid, but it's not true anymore. And so for me, it's like, can I give myself a little bit more permission to be human, even if it's messy? And can I trust that my commitment to being present is going to shine through? That's one domain. Now, for other people, it might be the opposite. It might be they've lived most of their lives without as much sensitivity or awareness around impact. And so with authenticity and some of the pitfalls there is overexpressing yourself, which trends toward narcissism over time. And that isn't to say we have to beat ourselves up or we don't bring more of ourselves. For many of us, we need to bring more of ourselves and trust ourselves more. But for those of us who maybe need to make more room for other people, it's a different skill set to develop. So what I'm often asking myself or when I'm facilitating other people, it's like, can I be me? Can you be you? And can we find what the we is that feels good to both of us? We call that mutuality. And as someone who does a lot of dance is like the perfect metaphor for this. I mean, it's not only a metaphor, but it's like, how do I want to move my body right now in space? How is this person wanting to move their body right now? And then what's this rhythm that we're finding together that is sustainable and pleasurable?
This is probably a weird question, but how long as humans can we sustain this authentic connection and conversation? When I picture some of the most authentic conversations I had, some of them lasted for 5 minutes. And some of them lasted for hours, and I guess it's different with everything, but what's our capacity as humans to hold that and be in that with someone else?
It's dependent on so many things, like so many things. And I think that's what really points to what my life mission is to kind of map that or get a sense of it. There are biological factors that influence our capacity in any given moment. Nutrient levels, hormone levels, how much we slept, are we hydrated, what's our nutrition like, and what's our blood sugar doing? I mean, we could spend a whole time just talking about that. There's psychological factors, what are my wants and needs and what are my tendencies? Some of us crave deep connection more than anything. And so our capacity for it may be higher, but our capacity to be alone by ourselves or our capacity to stay present with ourselves the way we would be with another person when we're alone may be reduced. Vice versa. Some people may have an incredible capacity for processing large amounts of information quickly. They're successful in business or academia, but their capacity to slow down and be with the sensations in their own body is like makes them want to squirm and jump out of their, chair and everything in between. And so and it's also dependent on each individual relationship. So, and not just that relationship over time, but that relationship in that moment. Maybe there are days where I only have capacity for a little bit of depth. Now I crave it, more than anything over time, but to be able to be like, that's okay too. I don't have to give more than I have right now is kind of a permission edge that I'm working with, right now. So I think that the North Star that I would encourage people to point to, and that I'm trying to point to is, can I be authentic with myself as much as possible? And that may be internal, that may be relationally, but if I'm keeping my finger on that pulse, then I'm staying centered and I'm able to come back to regulation when things get a little chaotic and uncontrolled.
And what does that look like for you in wearing different hats during your day, right? Because there's the Dr. Brian, and then there's the friend Brian, and there's the colleague Brian. Like, what does that look like throughout your day as you're wearing these different titles, these different experiences? How are you maintaining that throughout your day?
Yeah, so whether it's a blessing or a burden, I don't entirely know, but my brain doesn't compartmentalize. It's like
Mm,
not able to compartmentalize or
mm.
dissociate from things. And so I didn't come up with this phrase, but what I really strive for, what I really need is an undivided life where the way I am as a whole human being anywhere is the way I am everywhere. Now, context matters. So then it's a matter of setting context. I'm a whole human, but this is my role here. These are aspects of experience that may get more of our attention in this context, and these are aspects of experience that may get less attention in these contexts, but I'm still a whole human, and that's what's here. And I'm inviting you to be a whole human too. I don't always say it like that, but I'd like to be able to say things like that more. But in medicine, for example, will set context of like, we're here to talk about your health today. This is what you can expect in our time together. This is logistically, you're going to get a plan that has recommendations at the end of this, and these are how our follow ups are going to go. But within the bounds of this conversation, we're exploring, what is making you sick or what is keeping you stuck in your life. And we recognize that you're a whole person. And when we talk about any one of these variables that affects your health, it's connected to everything else. That's going to be a very different context setting than when I'm leading relatefulness or when I'm on a date or when I'm with a friend. But I think the ability to set context and then recontext in the moment is how we bring genuine authenticity to leading. Not a controlling leading, but like an inviting leading. Like, hey, I was thinking we're going to do this thing. Is that the frame you're holding? Oh, it's different. Okay, what are we wanting here?
And you're probably more qualified to answer this person more than anyone else. So good luck. Speaking of my own personal experience, because I know you work with people who've had brain injuries, and I, for a long time, didn't feel like myself. And there is an interesting quality of not feeling like yourself that is hard to explain because that sounds crazy that you're yourself, but you don't feel like yourself. And I struggled with figuring out who I was in a moment where I wasn't myself and what that looked like. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak to that and speak to authenticity in moments when you don't feel like yourself.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So, and I had a personal experience of this recently with a recent medication trial that I did, where I was like, wow, there are parts of my brain that are now active that haven't been active in many, many years. And there's this whole embodied cluster of sensations that go with that I have that are also associated with pain and confusion and things I didn't know about myself in that stage of my life. And now that's suddenly right here and I don't feel like I have access to whatever, social skills or what have you, and it can feel really vulnerable. And so some people are going to be safer than others to share that with. But what I tried was with a friend. I just named it. I'm doing a medication trial and I don't really feel like myself right now. And I feel extra self-conscious about how I'm coming across socially. How is it for you? Or, hey, I just wanted you to know that. With a close friend, I'll ask, how is it for you? Because
Mm.
sometimes I'll be like, I didn't think you were acting weird at all. Or like something about hearing impact or their experience kind of gives me permission to relax a little bit into the murkiness of the uncertainty of who I am. It's not like it erases it. In the context of what you're talking about, it might be like I had a traumatic brain injury and it affects how I process when I interact. And right now I'm feeling super disoriented and I don't need anything from you, but I just wanted you to know that.
So, probably to overshare, but for me, it was, I would be perceived as anxious even though I didn't feel anxious. So people's reaction to me was, "Shawna, you feel anxious." And my response is, "That's so interesting because I feel really calm because I'm talking to you and talking with you is something that I really enjoy." And so it's interesting that the perception is that you're experiencing anxiety, even though that's not my lived experience. And so it was this big mismatch of how do I be with other people's, like you're saying, other people's response to me, even though that's not my response to myself.
Totally. Yeah, and that's a tricky one. I mean, I think for me personally, that's one of the hardest ones, and the working model that I'm with, that I'm not attached to and open to modifying, but the working model is, how do I be with the parts of myself that are afraid or grieving or whatever, trying to hurry up and resolve the uncertainty when another person is having a certain experience of me.
Mm,
That's like the self-care angle, whatever, because we're all just mirrors for each other, right? So
absolutely.
whatever another person sees in me is something that they're seeing in themselves. And there is a relationship here that is real. And so that it might be if you are not self-abandoning by asking this, it might be something like, what are you noticing in me that makes you think I'm anxious? Or what seems anxious to you about how I'm being? Now, if you're not curious about that, or if that's just your way of trying to like resolve any conflict, then maybe don't. I'm projecting by saying that because I don't want to do that. I'm done taking care of people because I don't want them to be with their own discomfort. But I do care about the relationship. And so if I said something that I'm not aware of that could have been more skillful, and it's in my integrity to have had it be more skillful, I just wasn't able to, then I wanna know that. I wanna know what it's like for them. But if I know I'm doing the best I can and I'm in my center and I'm being truthful and they're not getting me or they're having a radically different experience of me, then I have to decide, is this a relationship that I want to continue to get curious about, or are we not a good match because we're just triggering each other?
And what's your deciding factor in that?
A pattern over time, usually. So the preference for comfort can be a pitfall. Like some of my best relationships have been forged where
Mm.
we're neurologically, I'm neurodivergent. Like they're neurologically different than me. I had all these stories and assumptions about who they were and what they wanted. And we just time tested it by being present and asking questions and getting curious. And I mean, relatefulness has changed my life. So bringing those skills into my friendships has supported me in co-building friendships with people that are like, I want that too, and I didn't see that blind spot, and oh wow, you're having this experience, and we're like, it's the dance. We're finding our dance. But if I'm trying to dance with somebody and we're continually stepping on each other's feet and we're like both trying to look at what we're doing wrong and it just creates more and more conflict and frustration over time, then the most loving thing to do for both of us might be to be like, maybe we should dance with other people, and I don't have to resent you for that. I might still have reactions to it, don't get me wrong, but like that's kind of how I'm orienting to it.
That brings me into another question I had for you is how do you create conversations where people can disagree honestly without being defensive?
Oh, yeah. There's so many ways to do this. One way, it kind of goes back to what we're saying about setting context and recontexting. So setting context might be like, are we like what do we both want here in our discussion? Is it that we want to know that we're both welcome as our with our views? Is it that we both want to arrive at some sort of like more nuanced conclusion and we're finding it our way to that together by kind of it's dialectic, you say this, I say this, and we're like until we find yeah, okay, that's the synthesis that is we're on the same page. Or is our goal not at all to be on the same page? I mean, you could have a conversation where it's like the desire is to win. What we're gonna fight, and one of us, we're gonna try to win. But like, can we do that consciously? Competition can be a really pleasurable experience in certain contexts and for certain people. But if we're not clear on what we're doing, that's when there tends to be misunderstanding and resentment and frustration. And then we start kind of reacting from our unconscious defense patterns instead of leaning into what we authentically want and are choosing.
Please tell me if I'm missing this, but what it sounds like to me is that you're almost the third person narrator sometimes in a conversation.
Yes.
You're stopping the conversation with the first person and you're saying, "Okay, we're going to zoom out. We're going to third person narrate what's happening and then have authentic connection once we know where we're going."
Yes, 100%. It I've heard it sometimes referred to as meta awareness, but in relatefulness we talk about it as third person awareness, which is a masterful skill in being like zooming out and now you see the kind of the greenhouse that we're in and we're like, it looks like that. And sometimes it can just be pointing it out. Hey, we seem to be arguing right now. Do we want that? And this isn't some like way to try to be passive aggressive or like not own our experience. Sometimes we have to be direct. But sometimes it can also create a lot more space to just zoom out and be like, where are we? And did we realize we got here? And like, do we want to be here? I'll never forget this time that I was with a friend, two friends. This was a few years ago, so I was still learning a lot of this stuff. And we're sitting at a vacation home and we were going to go into town to get some dinner. And a friend was like, I have a really scary thing that I want to name. And we're like, oh, what's going on? And he was like, I'm so afraid you guys aren't going to like me for this, but I really don't want to go to dinner. I really just want to get something to go. And we were all like, hell yeah. Like, I don't think I want to go either. Like, I'm so glad you named that. Like, we would have all just unconsciously gone along with this thing because
This
we think we
plan.
should do it.
Yeah.
And we're like, all right, for the rest of the weekend, we're going to name our desires when they come up
Mm,
for like what we want together. And we're just going to trust that even if we don't want the same thing, we're going to figure it out. And
mm.
it was so cool. And it radically changed my friendship with this specific person from that day on. And actually, probably most of my friendships since that time. Now,
Mm.
I'm practicing that skill in other contexts, but it's just like, oh, that's so delicious. It's so fresh. It's so open. Why would I not do this all the time?
The next thought I have is it feels good to be on the receiving end of that. It feels good when someone else can also provide that, when you're not the only person who's speaking out loud what the feelings are. When someone else, what I'm hearing you say is, even though this is what you do all the time, it was someone else being honest about how they felt that made you feel that you could then be honest yourself. It's like this honesty soup where it's like, oh, we can, if one person does it, then we can all kind of do it together. And they were the first person who jumped off and said, okay, we're going to do this.
The type of dance is co-leading, and there are going to be moments and phases where one person is leading more than the others, but the invitation is that we all be embodied leaders in our own lives, which means we're connected to our center, we're in tune with what we want and need, and we have the courage to voice it and bring it. The best friendships in my life are where we're co-leading. I need so much support. Yeah, I'm trying to teach and share this with the world, but like I'm still a student all the time, and I get anxious when I had this experience even just a few weeks ago where I was at a park with someone, and he was like, "I want to leave," and I was kind of like, Okay," and I kind of went along with it, and he was like, we like literally stopped in the middle of the walk, and he was like, "What do you actually?" He's like, "I
Mm,
don't feel like we can come to a compromise until I know what you want." And I love that, because we've practiced this together many times, but it was like, I didn't realize I was doing that, and I was like, "I want this." And then we were able to find a compromise that felt good to us, and he actually felt like he could lean more of his authentic self in because he felt me. This is a dance move, where it's like when someone weight shares with you
mm,
and you give them more weight, they actually have more range of motion because they can feel their connection to the ground through your structure. And I think when we're running scripts of what we think other people are wanting or needing, we're not giving our full weight. And so we're all just kind
mm.
of awkwardly like, are we dancing?
I like that analogy a lot. My next quandary is I'm sure this has happened over millennia because we're humans and we love to tell stories and we love to complain and that is like a part of human culture. And for you, what's the difference between authentically sharing something versus complaining? Because for me, sometimes it brings the energy of a room down once their contribution is a complaint. And I know that we all have moments where we're complaining, and that is so acceptable and allowed. And maybe it's the continuation of the same person who always has a complaint over and over and over again. And you feel that they are continuing to bring the energy out of the room. How do we honor someone where someone is and shift an energy without making that person feel like their voice is still contributing to the conversation?
So I'm not 100% on that by any means, but I mean, 100% on even how to answer that, to be honest. But there are a couple ideas, and then it
Please.
might be interesting to try them and see what happens. One might be if this is a temperament thing, if this is a pattern like that's like, wow, okay, this person does this all the time, then, I might get curious about what's driving that. And they may not know. I may not ever get the answer to that question, but it could be that, I mean, some people like stress. Some people find that they feel more alive with that. Others need a lot of emotional support and don't. Well, let me be clear. We all need emotional support. But some people are not getting that need met in their relationships. Maybe they don't have any professional therapeutic support. Maybe they don't have much personal therapeutic support. And it's a strategy that their brain has learned, usually unconscious, to be heard Well, if I, express big emotion, well, people are affected by that and then they give me attention. And so I want to explore this razor's edge of how do I like love people where they are, but still have boundaries and still have preferences and still be like, I don't want to hang out with this person. Now, that might sound a little extreme. Some people may have long friendships that they want to have, and there are people that are doing that. And then that might be like having a conversation. Hey, I noticed that, and this has to be authentic, like not psychotherapy type talking, but it's like, I notice you complain about this a lot, and I love you and I want to support you, but it has an impact on me. Like, what are you needing? That's one way. Another way might be like asking permission. This is more on the complaining end, like, hey, can I vent for a little while? Or like you could say that to the person that's always complaining. Hey, I understand we all need to vent sometimes, but I'm not available for that all the time. So if we're going to do that when we hang out, or if you want to do that when we hang out, I need you to ask me for whether or not I'm available for that and negotiate those boundaries. If someone's doing it and it's the first time they've done it, then I might get curious, about, okay, what's going on? What's going on in your life right now? And kind of walking that balance between setting boundaries and honoring my own capacity while also being loved.
I think that's the challenge for me is all 3 of those and weighing each one in the moment.
It's really, really hard. It's the work of our lives. There's not a formula for this. It's a practice and it's messy. But can we be kind to ourselves as we're fumbling in the mess? That's the practice.
I know you are a master conversationalist. If you could teach one conversation skill that would increase connectivity in conversation, what would that skill be?
I mean, I think curiosity, that one, I'm not entirely sure how to teach that because it is fairly, like, I'm naturally, like, I have high trait curiosity. And so the skill slash practice for me is just having the courage to be like, I'm curious about this.
Mm.
Or if that's too abrupt, I might just say it as a question. I'm just asking questions. I'm trying not to interrogate, but I'm trying to like let my aliveness shine through and be like, oh, what about this? Or like, is it like this? And I let that lead. And I think that can be so valuable for the reasons I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation around reverse charisma and people feeling heard. But for me, a big need for regulating my nervous system is disclosing my own experience. And so I'm still trying to find ways to do that in like relatefulness, non authentic relating containers, or in friendships with people that maybe they don't do that very often. So it's like, am I going to name something that now they're like, am I supposed to do something with that or not? And it's like, no, I just needed to name it. And so, that could be valuable is how can I reveal just a little bit more of myself, just a
Mm.
little bit more about what's happening either in the present moment or some context of self that I'm bringing.
So
Because,
let's give an example. So let's
yeah,
say we're meeting at a community event. We haven't seen each other in a while. We're just walking up to each other. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
yeah, it's great to see you. I'm assuming in this where I'm excited to see you. Yeah.
That'd be so
Yeah.
embarrassing if
So
it
let's say I'm
wasn't.
excited to see you. I could ask, what have you been up to? Or, what are some live updates? I could ask that, and I often do ask that. But what I'm finding feels a little bit more fresh and a little bit more present and embodied is what is something that's getting your attention in your life right now? Or like,
Mm.
where's your life force? I've been asking that lately. That can sound kind of weird to certain people. But I'll be like, where's your energy? Like, where's your excitement? Like, what are you doing right now? Like, what has your attention is another way I've said it. That seems to go well because then people are like, oh, yeah. And that they feel like excited and invited to like share what they're doing now instead of like this kind of narration of chronology of like, well, I did this. And then that kind of keeps the conversation up here, which is fine. That's a choice. For me, that's unsatisfying. For me, I want it to be here. So horizontal. Yeah. So it's like, what's our thread? How can I connect the story of who you've been and who you are to where we are now? That sounds kind of abstract, but yeah. And then I'll just let the conversation go and I'll follow the aliveness. Where's my excitement? Where's their excitement? Where's their feeling a little more stale? If it's feeling a little more stale, I might ask, okay, well, what am I genuinely curious about? And then ask them that. Or like if it feels stale, like we don't want to interact, and then I might leave the interaction and be like, hey, I'm gonna go get some water. I'm gonna do this. It was really good to see you. Or if it wasn't good to see them, then I'll just say I'm gonna go get some water. I'm really not a big fan of niceties if they're not supporting the truth.
Yeah, I struggle with that. I am learning how to exit conversations gracefully, that I no longer feel like the conversation is moving forward. That for me is a really big challenge.
Is there
And
anything that go ahead, sorry.
no, no, keep going.
I was gonna say, is there anything that you found that's worked for you or that you
No,
like?
I haven't really. I think that one thing that does work is to say, "Thank you so much for everything that you shared. I need a breather. I'm gonna go grab some air," which isn't untrue. Like, I do feel like, "Okay, I hit my capacity load, and how do I gracefully exit this conversation that I think there's this interesting point. So we just had a family reunion, which I love, and it's like a combination of so many people and you're having all these like micro conversations all day. And you know when you wrapped up the conversation, you know when you've said everything. And it's that how do I exit to move on to seeing the people in the next room that I also want to connect with without making that other person feel like see you later, sucker. Like how do you
Yeah.
how do I gracefully leave that knowing that I feel complete in that conversation and I'm ready to move on to the next one. Yeah, I don't think that I have the right strategy except for excusing myself to go get food or water or air.
Mhm. And
I
and
haven't figured
some
out a way.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes and this gets tricky because this is something that I've learned from other or heard from other people that teach boundaries and things like that, but I'm still trying to get my own bearings on how comfortable I feel with what I'm about to say. But sometimes the most loving thing to do, depending on another person's capacity, is to just do that. But if I am trying to find something that like feels like I'm in integrity, then I might say, I enjoyed connecting with you. There's other people here that I want to connect with too. I want to make sure that I have time for that. So I'm gonna, I'll circle back later. Or if you're like, I don't want to do that, then it might be like, I'll see you around. I
Or,
do that at
"Hey,
net.
let's go take this conversation to the group over there because we haven't seen them yet." I
Yeah, inclusion can be great. That can be a game changer. That's a facilitator move right there.
ugh,
That's embodied because then you're like, my friend is so good at this. He has found that he gets to. He was telling me this last night that he is less attached to outcomes with the specific person that he's talking to if he includes other people. And we were
mhm.
talking about dating. So it's like, let's say you're at a singles event or something, that's not structured. And it's like, well, including other people, like including other guys in the group conversation is often a way where he feels more himself and more able to connect in the way that he wants to
Mm.
connect with women because of that. And so, I mean, that's just one example, but at a family reunion, I mean, that could be great, potentially.
I found myself struggling and was like, "Oh, I can't wait to have this conversation with Brian because I know I get to bring it up and
I'm so glad you
hear
did.
Brian's take on it." Okay. What do you feel is the difference between a conversation where someone builds trust, where there's trust already there, or where it doesn't feel safe to trust the other person that you're with?
I wanna make sure I really understand the question. Would you mind saying it again?
When I first met you, I was like, "Oh, I can trust this person and I can go there." Like, there's this almost immediate sense of, I feel like this person has built-in safety. He knows people who I know. I can tell by the way he presents himself that we could have an authentic conversation even though we're meeting for the first time. Like, there's this sense that I have, and that is not true with everyone. And there is, for me, a feeling of I will be an authentic version of myself, but there is a thin layer of trust
Mm,
there of
mhm.
going to a deep place. And then there's other times where it's like, I think there could be something there, but it's going to take a while to build. And gauging how to interact is a practice for me of how much trust do I feel in this other person not knowing them, and where do I go and what level of depth do I go? Trusting my intuition and instincts, but okay, how do I gauge where I'm at when I first meet someone?
Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, for me, and I think for folks that tend to do a lot of mindfulness or embodied practices, it's usually something one feels in their body. Like some people we meet and it's just like, I feel safe with them like right away. And it's just like, oh, this feels easy. Cool. Or like there's something about their openness. So there's something about their energy that like when I met you, I remember just being like, wow, I love her energy. He just seems open and vibrant and full of life and enthusiasm, and I'm like that, so when I meet other people like that, I'm like, "Hell yeah, let's go." And then there's a lot of people that feel very contained to me. They might seem grounded, they might seem relaxed, but it's like they're behind glass, and it's kinda like,
Oh, that's a
"Okay."
great description.
Yeah, and I had this experience last night. Like I said, I was at a networking event, and it was like I was talking to somebody, and we're both interested in the same things. And it was confusing, and I debriefed it with somebody that knew both of us, and I was like, "What's going on there?" Like, we're talking about authentic relating, but I don't feel him at all. Like, it's like
Mm,
he's behind glass.
mm.
And, like, past versions of me would, like, really judge that, and I, like, noticed judgment coming up in me of, like, "Oh, yeah, like, this person's whatever, neurotypical," or, like, I don't get that, they're disconnected, they're not in their body," or whatever, and I was like, "Wait a minute, what's actually going on here?" And then when I learned more about that person's backstory, I was like, "Oh, that makes sense." And I don't like interacting with that's not my preference to interact with people who that's their default state. The paradox is that once I kind of understood and fully owned that, I like judged him less. I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, there's gonna be some people that I meet that like just doesn't feel good to connect. Now, if we would have been in a men's group together and got to know each other over time, like that could totally change. So some of it is like, what is this initial dance, and how quickly can we find a rhythm that feels good to us? But the speed of finding a rhythm that feels good to us doesn't necessarily mean that the longevity of that dance is going to be healthy or things like that. And so sometimes it's, oh, okay, well, I'm going to do this dance for a little while because I'm curious, and we're going to see where it goes. I mean, is that not what dating is? Like going on dates to see how you feel together over time. And then other times it's hard won. It's like I have to interact with this person because they're a coworker and okay, well then how can we find a way a way of relating that is sustainable and healthy enough? And then sometimes they end up being people that we really love over time. So it's a lot of moving parts, but those are some of the things I think of.
Is there anything that we haven't chatted about in terms of authenticity, relatedness that you'd like to add to this conversation?
It's like my brain is now thinking about that question, but right when you said it, was like the thing that just leapt out was like trust yourself and just trust yourself. Sometimes it's the thing that you're like, this is big in relatefulness because in relatefulness, it is a meditation practice. It's a social
Mm,
meditation. So we're
mm.
talking, but it's a meditation practice that encourages including aspects of our experience, even if they don't make any logical sense, non sequiturs. Hey, when you're talking about that, I have this image of a horse and I have no idea what it means. I have no idea if it's even relevant. Like, what is that? And sometimes people are like, "Oh my god, like, I'm in touch with this feeling of, like, my grandmother's farm, and, like, I had these positive memories, and, like, that was such the image that I needed right now to, like, I don't know, make some connection in myself." And sometimes it's like we're tapping into some subconscious relational field that might be the key that unlocks something. And so maybe saying that in an everyday conversation might come off a little bit differently, but that's one example of the extreme of, like, what is it to actually trust my experience and lean into the scariness of revealing just a little bit more. Because if I can do that, I'm more than likely going to find the kinds of connections that feel so good to be in. And vice versa. I'm going to also find the people that like, wow, that's not a good fit for either of us. Or we're misunderstanding each other. So, maybe we're gonna course correct and try something different. But it starts with self-trust because it starts by being like, I can be with my experience. It's worthy. It's many of us have internalized that we can't trust ourselves, that if we name what's true, we're gonna be rejected, we're gonna be judged, and we might be in certain contexts. But if we're gonna live a life that feels fully alive, where we're centered in ourselves, where we feel like the relationships that we have see us for who we really are, we have to tell the truth. And I think this is how.
Please tell people how they can work with you and what that looks like.
There's a few different ways you can work with me. So if you go to drplant.com, drplant, plante.com, that is my landing page. And there's info on there about integrative health coaching that I do, which brings more of the relational stuff and more of the psychological development stuff in with my understanding of physiology and how your body works, but it's not medical in focus. So I tend not to do a lot of testing or prescribing in that context. If you want medical support, you can see me at the Amen clinics. That's where I do a lot of diagnostic testing. That's where I might prescribe. If you're in California, that's where I'm licensed. I will sometimes order testing out of state, but I can't prescribe anything that's not a supplement. If you're interested in public speaking or booking me on your show, you can access that information on my website as well as group facilitation. I'm not leading any groups currently, but that other than what we're doing in Orange County with Relatefulness, but those are some ways where we might do the dance and find what feels good and what you need and what could help you live into more of your wholeness.
And if someone wanted to know more about relatefulness, where would a resource be for that?
The Relateful company is fantastic. Now, there's other similar adjacent practices like authentic relating. That would be like Art International, Authentic Relating Trainings International, or the Authentic Revolution. I think it's called authenticrev.org. And then Circling is similar to Relatefulness. Circling Europe used to be a thing, but I don't think they're an organization anymore. But yeah, those are all similar practices.
In ways that you can be involved in having authentic,
Yeah.
relatable conversations.
Learning these skills, having these experiences. I mean, those were the things that really changed my life. I was a naturopathic doctor on the edge of burnout. I'm still on the edge of burnout, not going to lie. But finding these practices and bringing them into my personal life has changed everything. And it's changing how I think about health.
Thank you so much for joining me. You're listening to Authentically Shawna with Dr. Shawna Burke. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interests in products or services referred to herein.